Welcome. Welcome to the Ministry Forum podcast, coming to you from the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College, where we connect, encourage, and resource ministry leaders all across Canada as they seek to thrive in their passion to share the gospel. I am your host, the Reverend John Borthwick, Director of the Center and Curator of all that is ministryforum.ca. I absolutely love that I get to do what I get to do, and most of all, that I get to share it all with all of you. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to give us a listen, whether you're a seasoned ministry leader or just beginning your journey. This podcast is made with you in mind. Welcome to another episode of the Ministry Forum podcast. We're delighted to have as our special guest this week, the Reverend Rebekah Mitchell. She's the minister at St. Peter's in Madoc and is a trained and licensed and all those credentialed psychotherapist, spiritual. Go ahead, Rebekah.
Actually, not yet.
Actually, not yet.
Right.
Hold the phone, everyone.
Yeah.
That's not quite yet. I've given too much credentials. Rebekah,
Yes,
who are you?
I am working on becoming registered with the CRPO, and it's just been a little bit hiccupy. They've just had their portal on hold, but that is coming very, very soon.
But we're excited. I mean, we want to say that it feels like you are already all licensed, because from those of us who are hanging out with Knox College, you are someone who went to Knox College not once, but twice, and graduated twice. All the times. And so we are delighted to have you as a Knox alum, a two-time Knox alum. Is there a third in our future? Who knows? Who knows what is going to happen? The other special thing about today's podcast is I'm not going to be interviewing Rebekah. You might hear my voice from time to time. I can't help myself. But Sara Traficante is going to be interviewing Rebekah as a part of the Ministry Forum podcast. She is one of our awesome Ministry Forum interns, and we are delighted that when she was thinking about who could I talk to, who could I interview, we were talking about some unique characters, perhaps, in the PCC today, and Rebekah Mitchell's name came up, and you'll maybe find out why as this beautiful interview begins. Take it away, Sara. It's all on you.
Hi, Rebekah. Thank you so much for this opportunity to chat with you today here on the podcast. I just wondered if, as we open up today, if you could tell us what you'd like to share about yourself as an introduction.
Sure. Well, I am a two-time Knox grad. I went to Knox for my MDiv, 17 years ago or something, maybe more than that even now. It's 17 years since I was ordained. So, of course, Knox came before ordination. And have spent many years in congregational ministry. Took a little bit of a break from that to return to Knox to do my MPS, which for those who might not know, because, using letters sometimes just confuses people. It's a Master's of Pastoral Studies, and I always follow that up by saying, but it's actually a Master's of Psychospiritual Therapy, because then people have an idea of what it's actually about and what I was studying. I thought I was out of congregational ministry, and then God had other plans. So I have found myself in the pastoral charge at St. Peter's Madoc, and I'm excited to be there, and we'll talk about that a bit more. It's an interesting call. It's not your average call, so we'll talk a little bit about it too.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm really excited to hear about where you're taking your ministry today at St. Peter's. But before we get there, I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about what brought you back to Knox College for the MPS degree. I'm also an MPS student, and so I have some context for what this degree is all about, but I'm always curious about ministers who come back and engage in this kind of psychospiritual therapy study.
Yeah, there's probably not a quick answer to that, but there's a lot of things that went into it. But I would say that really coming out of the two hardest years of the pandemic, I just hit a point of burnout, as many of my colleagues did. And I knew I needed a break. I was leaving a congregation that I had been through the pandemic with, and I just needed to step away from ministry and figure out what next steps were. And as I was sort of contemplating that, I had this, interestingly, I had this um, intake interview with a psychiatrist who was helping me to get some more mental health resources. And we were chatting away and, coming to the end of our conversation or our appointment. And he said, you're very, very articulate. Clearly, you've done studies before. You understand what studying is about. You could do what I do. And it would take you a couple of years. You could go back to school and you could become a psychotherapist. And he talked a bit. And then as he was talking, he sort of like realized what he was saying. His eyes kind of went wide on the video call. And he said, I'm not telling you what to do with your life. I'm not telling you what to do with your life. I'm not. And I kind of laughed because I was like, no, don't apologize for that. That feels like a door just opened, because I was very much stuck of, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was leaving ministry and I had no idea what the next step on the path was. So that very much felt like a Holy Spirit moment for me. He wasn't a religious person, so I didn't, scare him by saying, no, that's just the Holy Spirit making you say that out loud. That's why you had to say that, even though you feel like you shouldn't. So I just sort of let that go. But for me, it was like, wow, yeah, this Holy Spirit moment. And I got off the call with him and started Googling. And he said, look up CRPO and you'll see listed, programs that you can take there that will be accepted by them. And of course, as I did that, Knox College was one of them. And so that just kind of made me go, wow, like I could actually do this training. I could do it in a place that is familiar to me, which in a moment or in a season of feeling very sort of burned out and stressed out and all of those things, just the familiarity of Knox felt comforting and felt like we're going to be speaking a common language. And then the idea that spirituality would be actually part of the psychotherapy studies was extra, because it felt like I was really struggling with the feeling that that if I was leaving congregational ministry, I was turning my back on God's call on my life. And that was really upsetting to me. I was crying over that a lot. And when I saw this program, I suddenly went, oh no, this is just an evolution. This is just like another step on the path. And wherever this leads, it's not me turning my back on my faith or on my love of God or even on my church. Even if I was taking some time away from church, it didn't feel like I was turning my back on it. So that's kind of how that all happened. So I sent an email to Angela Schmidt and said, I'd like to talk and I'd like to hear more about this. And I was considering other schools as well, but after talking to Angela, for me, it felt very clear that Knox was the place I was going to go. That's kind of a long story, but there we go.
I love that. I love everything about this story. So I'm hearing you're talking about continuing on with your call and not letting that go and finding a new way to reorient your call, and just this moment of seeing that it could be a bit, even a kind of a homecoming back to Knox College is a beautiful connection too. Yeah. So wow, that's really special. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering, in the MPS program, because I'm there too now, I'm just especially since you are coming out having an MDiv background, you only had to take maybe half of the courses that I'm taking in the program. but a big part of the MPS is also our practicum experience. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to your psychospiritual or spiritual care practicum experience and just some of the experiential learning in the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that made Knox really work for me was that we were coming out of that pandemic and we were doing a lot of things online. I've had 2 in-person classes in my first semester, and then everything else from then on was online. And that was I live just north of Madoc, which is it takes 3 hours to get from my house to Knox College. And that's on a good day if everything goes right. And so doing in-person classes would have meant figuring something else out. And so being able to do stuff online was really important to me. When it came time for my practicum, I was offered the opportunity to be with St. Michael's Homes in Toronto and in their psychotherapy program, and that could all be accomplished online. It's a placement that really they expect everything to be online or on the phone, and so it is a center for addiction recovery, and so you're dealing with people who have housing issues and addiction issues, but they've also expanded their psychotherapy, and they get referrals from other agencies. So I started there, and it was kind of interesting. I had 2 clients in sort of the fall semester, and then in the winter semester, I co-facilitated a dialectical behavioral therapy group, a DBT group. So that's both running the group several days a week, and then having one-on-ones with some of the people in the group. My co-facilitator and I split up the clients, so we each had one-on-one clients through that, and I still kept my 2 clients through that. So um, it was really interesting. I loved my experience. My 2 clients were polar opposites. One who was in a pretty steady life, and one who was in utter chaos. Um, and then the DBT group was a whole nother thing, dealing with some people who had, people who have addiction issues, but we also had some, oh, I've just lost the word. It's not bipolar, it's borderline personality. I always have to think bipolar first and get that out of my brain, and then I can come up with borderline personality disorder. So, uh, you know, not your mostly steady, mostly fine people who just are dealing with anxiety or depression or it's a tough season of life because of grief or that kind of thing. These are people who were, often and continually in crisis, and so that was a whole lot of learning, and it was fascinating. I loved it. I loved my co-facilitator. She was wonderful. Um, I was also glad when the DBT group came to an end, just because I was tired by the end of that. But yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Wow. Wow. I can see just uh, the connection between the service and ministry, especially with those populations that are in so much challenge and economic, different addictions challenges, and how the spiritually integrated element of the therapy comes into play there. I don't know if you could speak a little bit more to that or how that would come in with using DBT. This is always sort of a fascinating exploration for me. How does the spirituality come
Yeah.
in?
Well, I think, as you know, in the program, we're taught to focus and follow with our clients. So it's sort of up to them where the spiritual stuff comes in. And I found with my 2 clients who were not part of the group, uh, they just went there naturally. And one of them very much opened the door herself. She is quite devout in her spiritual Christian life, and therefore that flowed very easily. And the other was not so much about any sort of formal religion, but did want to talk about God sometimes. So that was really great. Within the DBT group, our spirituality was less I'm going to lose a word again. Less outward, less obvious. There's two, oh my gosh, I hate when I can't remember words. There's two kind of implicit and explicit
I was just going to
spirituality,
say,
right?
yes.
I
I'm
got there.
still in course mode, so.
Yes. Yeah. So in the group, it was much more implicit but we always started with meditation. And there was a lot of grounding and centering and that kind of thing, and being in touch with what's the emotion coming up here? What's the thing behind this behavior? Which are all spiritual conversations. They're just not explicitly religious conversations. So, and you're dealing with people who are just, I mean, anybody who's addicted or has borderline personality disorder or is struggling to have housing is somebody who's got some pretty big wounds and some pretty big vulnerabilities in their life. And so the necessity for compassion and the necessity for that unconditional positive regard is just kind of next level. Like, you just have to come to these people with compassion. And sometimes it would be easier not to, because, out of all of that comes problematic behaviors. And sometimes you just didn't want to be compassionate. But that was a big part of the learning too, is what is the compassionate thing I can do in this moment? And it wasn't always just to be nice, quote unquote, nice. Sometimes it was to set a boundary and say, no, here's what happened. Here's what we need to do to fix it. And no, you don't just get away with a problematic behavior, especially in group. That was really important. And we had several times where somebody sort of blew up and then had to come back and apologize. And as facilitators, we had to set that norm, and we had to hold them to that boundary. But it was really beautiful to see when we held them to those things that it made the group stronger. It made them as individuals stronger. The group was incredibly compassionate and incredibly willing to welcome somebody back who said, I messed up. So that was a really beautiful thing to see too.
Wow. It's beautiful. Did you study DBT at Knox as part of your program, or was it more learning that was in the experiential practicum?
I would say probably 40%. Of what I understood about it came from the coursework, but 60% came from actually leading the group. And there's a lot of learning about DBT that happened. And it was because when you're learning it in coursework, I mean, I did a presentation on DBT, but it's sort of, you're talking about it in this ethereal, not lived experience way. And then all of a sudden you're having the lived experience, and a lot of the things, the pieces click into place, and you're kind of like, oh, yeah, I remember that we talked about what a skills group was in our presentation, but now I'm running a skills group. And so what that actually means and what it looks like is a big part of what you have to learn about DBT.
Yes, yes. And I am finding that myself in my own learning, where I've spent all, the time in the theories courses, and now I'm in my first practicum, and suddenly, oh, that's what this is all about.
Yeah. You find that little click that goes, oh, there's where that comes in. Oh, yeah, we did talk about that in class. Yeah. It's why the practicum is so important, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. As you're talking about the the group experience is kind of tying me back into the connection with congregational ministry, which is really a large group experience.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if this would be a good time to switch over to talking about your recent call at St. Peter's, and just what drew you back into congregational ministry after this time, this break into the MPS program?
Well, as I said, I thought I was done with congregational ministry. I began my program thinking that, and then as I went through the program, there was just all this confirmation that came to me, and in many different ways. It really came on strong in my second year, which was my practicum year. I was doing my practicum and leading a grief group with a minister, the Reverend Jennifer Cameron in Belleville, and then doing my capstone course. So I only actually had one course that second year because I'd done some summer courses and things, and I had gotten some credits from my MDiv. So in that, like, the thing with the practicum is that you also have the class that goes along with it, right? Where you're talking about all the things that are happening. You're doing some learning in that, but you're also talking about all the things happening in your placement and with your clients. And in that group, there was just so much confirmation for me. Even, we would start with a spiritual reflection for the day. And every time I did that, everybody would say, yeah, well, we can tell you're the ordained one here. And which they said is a very kind, loving thing. Like, it was really lovely. And when I got to the capstone course, which is kind of one of the, if you do things in the logical order, it's kind of one of the last courses you do. And what it does is it sort of has you reflect back on your program. Especially, there's a final paper that we did where we had a number of different areas to talk about and to look back over our 2 years of study, and or however many years, because some people do it as a part-time program. And as I was doing that, it was one of those, everything sort of clicks into place. And it was like, wait a second. The first time I did a presentation for one of my classes in the MPS, it was Miwan Yang's worry and anxiety class. And I was presenting on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was paired up with Matt Vazari, who's an ordained minister now. And when we got through our presentation, he's like, I can tell you're a preacher, because you just speak so naturally, and like, you can just get up in front of people and do this. And it looks so, you must be an amazing preacher because it looks so natural on you. And writing that paper for capstone just brought that memory back to me. And then I started thinking through all the things that had happened over the 2 years. And it was just like, wow, I don't think I'm done with congregational ministry anymore. And so especially during, not so much in my first fall semester, but in my first winter semester, all the way through the rest of the program, I was doing a lot of pulpit supply. Some with congregations that I previously knew, some with congregations that were new to me. And again, that was just very confirming. And there were a number of congregations that through all of that, I had relationships with, and were vacant and looking. And I was like, I think I have to apply and see what happens. And so I had 3 churches that I was applying to. I was thinking that I was going to be part-time ministry and part-time psychotherapy. None of the churches was St. Peter's. I was actually the interim moderator at St. Peter's and helping them with their search. But I was also preaching there sometimes because they're 10 minutes from my house. And in the midst of that, there was every first Sunday of the month, we do a birthdays and anniversaries lunch after church. And we, celebrate anyone who's having a birthday or an anniversary in that month. And we just have a nice time together. And I happened to be the preacher on rotation for the first Sunday of the month. So I was there. I went down to coffee and sandwiches and goodies afterwards, and at the lunch, and sitting at the table with someone in the congregation, and she said to me, "We just wish you could apply, Rebekah." And
Wow.
I thought about that. Like, that came back to me for about just consistently for about 3 days in a row. So I finally did what I do whenever I have something that I need to solve in my life, and I called my mom.
Yeah.
My father's a retired minister, and my mom is a pastor's wife extraordinaire. And I always joke that she's my pastor's wife because I'm not married. I don't have a life partner in any way. And so I call mom when I need to talk about stuff. And I called her and I said, somebody said this to me, and what do you think? And in the most typical Barbara Mitchell line ever, she goes, "You know what? Just throw all the balls in the air and let God decide." And and I went, "Okay." So then she said, "And now you need to call the clerk of session and have a conversation with her about what happens next." So I did that. And we decided that I would resign as the interim moderator, and it would be up to Presbytery to figure out what their next steps were, but I would apply because I had resigned and would be clear to do that. So I did that, and I was interviewed, and it was a lovely interview. And then the interim moderator was actually Lynn Donovan, who's at St. Andrew's Picton and has been there for years and has a very creative ministry there, doing a lot of things with groups within the community, a lot of community partnerships. And so, we had sort of talked a bit about this idea of that I don't want to just abandon the 2 years of study that I've done. I want to still engage in psychotherapy work. And they were looking for a full-time minister, and I was thinking, it's a lovely town, but it's a town of 2,000 people. It is not the same thing as a busy city church. So I was kind of thinking, like, I don't know how this is going to work out. And Lynn called me and she said, "Well, they want to talk to you again." And she said, "I think every conversation about ministry is a creative conversation these days because nothing is working as it once did." And so she said, what I'm asking you to do is to bring a vision to them of what it could look like for you to be their minister and to also engage in mental health work in the community. So I was like, okay. So we had a great conversation about that. And I went away going, I don't know what I'm going to say to these people. And, again, called mom, panicked about it for a while. And then the other thing I do when I have something that I'm trying to figure out is I have a very good friend named Tracy. And so I messaged Tracy and told her about it and said, "I don't even know where to begin with coming up with this vision." And she said, "Well, like, maybe make a graph of how your time would work and what that would look like." And as we talked about it a bit, I kind of went, yeah, okay. I can kind of see, like, splitting up the timing of tasks might be helpful. So I sat down to come up with this vision, and I thought, okay, well, the first thing I have to do is get something from scripture because I need that to be where things start. And so I'm not even sure how I did that. I just know that I remember having that thought. It has to start with scripture. I probably Googled scriptures and sending out because one of the things we talked about in my first interview was that the church so much has become about you come here. And I don't think that's the way Jesus wanted it. So I knew, of course, I came up with a verse from John that talks about, as the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. And so that became sort of the first piece of things. And I talked a bit about this idea that, we have to get out of our buildings. We have to do things in the community. We have to be, we can't just sit there and hope people are going to fill up. It hasn't been working forever. It's not going to work going into the future. So how do we move out into the community? And what does the community need from us? Because part of the reason people don't show up is because they don't think they need anything from us. Mm-hmm. So in the midst of that, I came up with the idea that, about 50% of my time would be doing the church stuff, all of the normal preaching, doing the meetings, doing whatever needs to be done for the church. And then the other 50% of my time would be mental health work. And I thought, I'm going to split that into two, 30% being sort of community initiatives, and then 20% of it being like as though the church is sponsoring me to offer pro bono psychotherapy appointments. Wow. So that people who can't afford therapy have an opportunity to receive therapy. And so I put that all into a graph and wrote about it and came up with some ideas like, we could run a mental health cafe and have that be like a monthly thing that we do where we just do some teaching and some discussion around things that are helpful for mental health. And, maybe we can partner with a library in Madoc that does a lot of things within the community. Maybe we could run a ecotherapy walking group. Again, just getting people out of their houses and together, and it doesn't have to be a religious thing. It can be let's just move our bodies and notice the world around us, because we know both of those things are super helpful for mental health. Mm-hmm. So I sort of listed off all these things and brought it back to the search committee, and God bless them. They went nuts for it. They thought it was amazing. And, I was kind of like, again, it's this Holy Spirit moment, because I was just coming up with something and I didn't even know what I was doing, but they loved it and thought it was such a refreshing thing to have a call, not just be about, I'm going to preach and bury people who need to be buried and marry people who need to be married. And one of the people on the committee said, well, we don't even have anything like that. Like, that would be a wonderful way for our church to be of use to this community. Yeah. Wow. So I feel like I talked for a long time.
Wow.
Now, but I get really excited about it and then I just can't shut up. So I also talk fast when I'm excited. So.
Oh, I heard every word. It was excellent.
Oh, good.
And I'm right there with your excitement, because that the quote that you said from Lynn Donovan, or I think that's where you said that it came from, that every conversation about ministry is a creative conversation. It's right. It's right there with
Lynn
us.
Comes out. That woman speaks in sound bites. Like, she just comes out with these quotable quotes without even trying. It's lovely. It's great to spend time with her. You just go away going, I need to write these things down. And
I love that. Wow. And it's,
sorry, if I could jump in, Sarah.
Ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Like Lynn, I've known her for years. And what I really appreciate about Lynn is the story she tells about going to St. Andrews in Picton and basically putting it out there. This is what I'm willing to do. Are you willing to, join me in this journey that's going to be difficult and full of change, and everything's on the table, and the transformation, like her church, the church that she serves, is now called the Andrew in Picton. It's and they've transformed the building, and very much that outward focus, which I think is beautiful. I think what's fascinating to me these days, in the role that I have now, going to different places, and I saw it in the presbyteries where I served as well, but just and even the congregations I served, the times when the church forgets to ask the question of like that outside question of, what does this community need? What would be
Mm,
helpful to this specific community? We rarely ask those questions. It's mostly about what do we need and how should we be
yeah,
served. And we sometimes will tick the boxes and do amazing ministry and amazing mission to the more obvious things, perhaps, like partnering with food banks and
yeah.
those who are addressing poverty initiatives and homelessness, and maybe even sometimes mental health. But I remember talking to a congregation recently, a rural congregation, just a couple of people, and I was saying to them, maybe you need to go, like, it's a very small community, so maybe, and you probably know everybody, maybe next time you're having breakfast or you're going to go out for lunch at the local restaurant, maybe you just start asking these questions. What have you heard this community really needs? What's missing
Mm,
here? And
yeah,
is there a way that the church as a thing could be a space to make something like that happen or support something like that happening? Maybe it's
yeah,
about the space of a church, like,
yeah.
yeah, we have no space for this. And wouldn't it be nice? I was listening to a United Church minister who serves up in the Bruce Peninsula. She serves not only United Church, but also, I think it's a Lutheran and United Church cluster kind of ministry. And
Mhm.
she said up in her neck of the woods, they had one of those kind of conversations, and someone said, "There's no place." And it sounds strange at this time of our lives in 2025, but it was, the youth have no place to dance in our community. And I'm like,
Mm.
this sounds a bit like Footloose, but okay. And they said they had no space like to hold dances or social events. And so one of the churches in that community heard this cry for like space to do this, and they've opened their church up for Friday night dances or socials for the youth of that community with no strings attached, just sort of like, hey, come and use our space. And so I really just want to really celebrate that notion of, because actually what surprised me in your telling, one of the tracks that I hear people talking about with how do we continue to lift up that those who graduate from a Master of Psychospiritual Studies and become eventually, licensed registered psychotherapists. But they also have gifts for congregational kind of ministries. How could this be a combo thing where a church could carry on in a part-time kind of way, and then the psychotherapist of the side of the minister could use that as a revenue generation to support the full-time-ish kind of role? But what I hear
Mhm.
you saying, and what I think is even more beautiful, is, oh my goodness, what if that was embedded into like this pro bono notion of this is the way the church uses the individual with the gifts that they do have to do things even beyond. But I still see it as a collaborative thing. Yes, you're going to have the one-on-one psychotherapeutic sessions, but you're also doing collaborative things with the church community in the wider community. And I just want to celebrate that. I think it's amazing. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
all this, Rebekah. It's beautiful.
Well, and I have to give like just huge credit to the session and the search committee at St. Peter's, because I can tell you that there were uh, bigger, maybe more um, city kind of churches who just couldn't even see the possibility of this.
Mm.
So for them to be like, yeah, we love this, we think we want to do this. A, God bless them for taking a risk, um, and B, for being able to have some creativity within and have that openness to, maybe it won't be the way it's always been. Maybe we need to go in a bold new direction. Um, yeah, I can't say enough good about the people that I get to serve.
That's amazing. I noticed on your social media too, I've been peeking around your Facebook for St. Peter's. And I saw one of the initiatives where you spend time out in the community at coffee shops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder if you could just tell us a bit
Yeah.
more about that. It's such a great idea.
So this came about because I'm not an office hours kind of person. I'm not, I know ministers who do actually really well with office hours, and they find that people drop in and it's meaningful for their community. And I was like, if you stick me in a room alone in a church for however many hours a day, like it's just not going to, it's not creative time for me. It's not soul feeding time for me. just no. And so I do some office hours. I'm not completely
Yeah.
without office hours, but I do office hours once a week. And then to give another option to people, I came up with this idea of doing an out in the community availability. So every Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m., you can find me somewhere in the community, and we post it on our Facebook page and we announce it at church so people know. And it's just a time to like drop in, have a chat, ask a question, bring a friend, whatever. And really, I wanted to do that because I thought, like there are some people who will never darken the door of the church, but
Right.
might like to talk to a minister or might like to talk to a spiritual leader. And again, thinking about how I think people who don't go to church feel about the church these days, I was thinking, we need a way that some of the people who love St. Peter's can bring a friend so that they can meet me and find out I'm not whatever your bad image of ministry is, that's not what I am. I'm not going to be judging you. I'm not going to be, mad at you that you aren't going to church regularly or whatever the fear might be, that we could sort of alleviate some of that by just having this out in the community time. So I think we're still at a stage where people are getting used to it, but I have had a couple of people drop in and bring a friend, and so that's kind of cool. It's neat to see that happen.
Yeah. It's very cool. And I don't want to go too far backwards, but I am thinking about just how this kind of ties into those class conversations that we have in our group time. And so right now I'm taking this practicum, and you spoke to your practicum before. And I don't know if all the folks who are in the ministry forum world, they know about that our practicums, they do involve 7 hours a week of course time. And it's this opportunity where we can share with each other in an open way about our own spirituality and spiritual practice and how that ties together, and ask clinical questions. But that some of those harder conversations pop up in that time together too, because it's interfaith spaces, folks who are coming in and out of the church, or everybody's drawn to the MPS from a different direction. And I can just see how having those open conversations in a safe space could tie into a way to bring that out into the community. I don't know, maybe I'm making a big leap here, but I just feel like it could, like I'm seeing that connection of being able to just speak freely in a safe space, and how you could tie that into your ministry by bringing your ministry out into the world. I don't know.
I saw, if I could jump in, I saw this when I was in the city of Guelph and minister there. A local community organization had discovered this thing called sidewalk talk. What I love about most of things that happen in humanity, in the history of humanity, is rarely is everything new. I've had all these innovative ideas, and then I go and do a Google search and go, oh, someone's already doing that. So there's this thing called sidewalk talk. And in the city of Guelph, a couple of community people were like, we want to have people who would volunteer to be listeners at sort of community events, and sometimes the more difficult community events. Is there other people? And so I got sort of wind of this, and I said, sure, I'll volunteer. You even got a t-shirt. And essentially it was a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, somebody something in California, of course, in California, who decided to, from their perspective, they weren't like it wasn't like a Christian kind of mission thing, but it was kind of the idea of them being stuck in an office all day. And they thought, what I'm going to do? I'm going to take 2 chairs. I'm going to put a sign out. I'm going to sit outside, and it basically says free listening here today.
Oh, wow.
And they ran this whole program, free listening. And then it just grew and grew. And there are regional chapters all over the United States of America called Sidewalk Talk. So we did it in Guelph for a season. where we did a little bit of training with folks just around how you listen to people. It was completely free. And so we did it at a local community market. We just set up a few chairs, and then people would come and sort of look and go, okay, what is this? And then you'd sort of say, it's just free listening. We could talk about anything. Really? Anything? And it's like, yeah, sure. Now, in this particular case, I wasn't identifying myself as a minister or anything like that. And we made it very clear that people were not professional like all the volunteers were not professionals. We were just willing to listen to somebody and hold space for somebody. So, I had people talking about, relationships or the state of the world or whatever. And we just sort of had a listening presence kind of thing. We also did it for, in Guelph, they have, like in many other communities, they have a Take Back the Night experience. And so they set up some chairs just for people who just needed to unpack or just wanted to have some time to talk. We had one around an Indigenous Day. This was before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, but there was an Indigenous event, and we again had some people who were willing to do that. And so, yeah, it's beautiful. I had this vision at one point. I left congregational ministry as well. It was on my list to do, but I imagined this kind of idea where I'd go to a pub or a coffee shop, and I would say, like, essentially, minister, free listening, buy me a coffee or buy me a pint. Just as a way of stirring that up. And one of our colleagues in the Presbyterian Church in Canada, do you know Shalini, who's a minister at University Community Church? Yeah. So she has on her laptop, and she hangs out in a university community. She has on her laptop, I'm a minister, talk to me. And it's sort of, and she says this creates all sorts, because she's also got like rainbow stickers and a bunch of stuff on her laptop. But it basically creates those kind of moments where you're putting yourself out in the world as a minister person. And yeah, people have a lot of things they might want to unpack, and it creates some really weird spaces and places. So yeah, check out Sidewalk Talk. I thought that was really,
that's great.
Really neat how you're doing that, and so great for Madoc. Way to go.
It's amazing. I'm just thinking, just if you have any other reflections just on the church today and where we're at, and just even in light of your creative approach to ministry at St. Peter's, if you have any other reflections for us on our church and our church today, on the church.
When I was leaving my congregation that I was leaving in 2022, we had a really good ministerial in that part of Etobicoke where I was ministering. And God bless them. They were lovely other ministers of other denominations. And they, I talked to them about the fact that I was leaving. And they said, well, let's have lunch. Like, let's go out to lunch and celebrate the time we've had together. It was absolutely lovely. And as we were chatting over lunch, the Lutheran minister said, every 500 years, there's some big shakeup in Christianity, and we're 500 years out from the Reformation. And if you don't think COVID-19 is that kind of pivotal thing that has shooken up society in general, but also our churches, I don't think you're paying attention. And so I feel like church is at this very, I don't want to say unstable, but that sounds negative, and I don't mean it in a negative way. I just feel like our whole world is uncertain and unstable in so many ways today. And that's reflected in our churches, and it could be really upsetting and scary, or it could be an opportunity for us to go, okay, so how do we do things differently? What does the difference look like? And for me, part of what is happening with St. Peter's is that they're willing to say, let's try different things, let's do different things. Because, we are a tiny congregation that has been here for 1 million years, and people aren't beating down the door. So what can we do that is different than what's always been done? And I think that's so necessary for our churches, because I think, coming out of COVID-19, just so many things have been impacted by that, and how we are as communities has been impacted through that. A lot of people got out of people who were actually pretty committed to the church got out of going to church every week. A lot of churches are doing online streaming of services, and I hear all the time from people who, they just weren't getting out the door quick enough, so they just decided to watch it online later. And so just a lot of things are in flux, and maybe that's the better word, in flux in our church these days. And I think that we're going to have to be creative about how we come to ministry and what that looks like. And it may even be that, churches stop being churches, and instead become something else, something new. I don't think that will, hurt God's kingdom. I think God will just find a new way to make it happen. So I think, we're in this real time of flux and change in a bigger way than we have been. I mean, I feel like the church has been changing for years and years and years, but then the pandemic happened and everything just kind of went exponential through that. So, and then of course the years since the pandemic are still like, I said this to my group that was working during my practicum. I'm like, it just never stopped, right? Like COVID-19 happened, and then George Floyd happened, and then the war in Ukraine happened, and then the war in Gaza happened, and now we've got Trump 2.0, and like it's just never stopped. And so like the need out there is, I think, just growing in the midst of all of this flux and change and major upsetting world events. I don't know if I answered the question or if I just talked there, but
these are really helpful reflections. It's really great. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I have a closing question for us here, unless John has something else that you'd like to tie in.
There was two things I wanted to sort of touch on.
Please.
One is a celebration of what you sort of started with, Rebekah, and it's been kind of a theme on the Ministry Forum podcast on a few of our different episodes. Just this definition of what is real ministry, right? These kind of questions and commentaries that happen. I mean, even when I stepped out into this role as director of the Center of Lifelong Learning at Knox College, I had people who said, so I guess you're stopping, like it's over now, right? You're not a minister anymore. And almost with a sense of like, in some cases disappointment, in some cases kind of like, kind of a bit of judgment, I'd say, of like, oh yeah, I guess you couldn't hack it, eh? Oh, that's too bad. And it's like, there are many, many, many different ways of doing ministry, and we've defined it for a good season that the only way of doing real ministry is when you're a minister in a congregation. Because we've got lots of ministers, people who are ordained, who are serving in different roles across the denomination and even in other denominations for sure. And not to say that I think we say this a lot. We say it carefully in certain settings in the sense of, if spirituality or Christianity, or I guess whatever flavor of institutional religion you're a part of, is a part of your pursuit of becoming a psychotherapist, if it's spiritually integrated psychotherapy, that's a form of ministry as well. Maybe, if I'm to stay in the lane of Christian ministry, it's a form of Christian ministry. In our opening conversation, Sara and I, before you came on, we were talking about how in her practicum, she's kind of feeling, she's not Jesus, but she's kind of feeling like Jesus in those spaces and places, holding space. Sorry, Sara, I outed you. Holding space. Yeah, you say.
Well, it just in my practicum, I've just been really connecting the dots on the fact that this really is Jesus' work. This is the real Jesus work.
Yeah. So amen to Jesus' work.
Hands and feet.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Like that's what discipleship is. That's what our faith is all about. And I think sometimes, you know, like we've forgotten that in some ways, or we've embodied it in ways that aren't helpful or aren't enough. We love going to church. We love studying the scriptures. We love Bible study. We love singing our hymns. What is that doing for the person outside our doors? And that's not to say we shouldn't be worshiping. That's important for us as our faith develops. But yeah, how are we being hands and feet? What are we doing for the person outside our doors? And especially for the person that we might not even see outside our doors, because I think that's a big part of it too. It's who is the person who's overlooked or who just doesn't get noticed? Because I think that's the person Jesus would go to. So I love that. This is such Jesus work.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, and generationally, you talked about being from a generational clergy family system. I have a sense that just from how I received people 25 years ago to like over the time of my ministry in places where many had got to a place of, I couldn't possibly do what you do. You're the minister. Like even to the simple pieces, and maybe they're not simple, but somehow we disconnected them. Like the minister is the professional prayer in the church.
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly do. What if I visited somebody and what if they wanted me to pray? Well, let's have a little chat about what that looks like. Or you're not visited unless the church hasn't visited you. Because I used to get this line all the time.
Yeah.
When is the church going to visit me? It's like, oh no, that's just code for when is John going to visit me?
Yeah.
But when did we disconnect it from the notion that, we read our gospels, but it seemed like, as I read them, those disciples had the power to heal and to do some pretty amazing things. And yet somehow we disconnected that only the Jesus or the minister is the one that has the real magic touch of all those things. And I think in a time when the church is changing a lot and professionalization of clergy is starting to diminish in the sense of how we can afford that and provide for that, and also just the numbers that are out there, we need to find ways of moving it back to, no, your prayers are as good as anyone else's prayers.
Mm-hmm.
You have maybe gifts for preaching. You have gifts for care and supporting other people and even going out into the community and doing some hands-on tangible Jesus work and getting that in the hands of all the people. If liturgy is the work of the people, then getting it in the hands of the people is, I think, what we're called to in this time that we are in flux.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways,
wow.
The other piece I wanted, this was on a totally different tack, just for humor's sake. I'm aware, Rebekah, I think, because I've seen you on the socials, I think you like the Blue Jays, and you're not just like a Blue Jays fan. Like you're not just one of those people who I might occasionally watch a Blue Jays game or something, or think the Toronto Blue Jays.
There's actually a game on right now,
and you're watching it.
No, I'm not. I want you to feel the compliment of I am not watching the game right now because I'm doing this podcast.
Well, we need to wrap it up quickly then for your sake. But I'm also aware that you're somebody who went to Dunedin recently to spring training, like super exciting. So I just wondered, just for all the Blue Jays fans who listen to the Ministry Forum podcast, what is your prediction for this season of the Blue Jays? How are we doing? I mean, it's only March 10th. It starts the end of March? Is that opening day?
Yeah. The season opens, I think it's March 27th, but I could have the day wrong. So I'm loving what I'm seeing in spring training. A lot of Jays fans are very cranky right now. They don't like the front office. They don't like some of the decisions that have been made with everybody else. I think it's an absolute joke that we haven't signed Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But that all aside, I just feel like there's a really good feeling in the team right now, and in the players, and even in the young guys who are, I call them the baby Jays. So yesterday I watched the game, and it was an away game, so it was mostly the baby Jays, and then I think Dalton Barshow was like the one name there. Oh, Schneider and Clement were in there at some point too, and they've actually had some experience in the big show. So, but I'm loving the energy. I'm feeling like it's good. I don't know how the season is going to go. I feel like you never know. Like, what was it? The Yankees 2 years ago had spent like this immense amount of money and just went nowhere with it. I just like to dog on the Yankees, so I could be making that up, but I know that every year there's some team that looks perfect on paper and the wheels just fall off, right? So, and that's part of what I love about baseball, because you don't know any given day, any given year how it's going to go. But I'm excited. I feel like last year, so my favorite Jay is Bo Bichette. My friends and I jokingly, I understand it's a joke, but jokingly refer to him as boyfriend, my boyfriend. So people will text me and say, boyfriend got a home run. And I'm like, yes, boyfriend did. And
Nice.
He seems to be doing really well in spring training this year, which is nice to see, because last year was hard. He had a couple of injuries, and had even before the injuries, was just having a not Bo Bichette year. So I'm really excited for the season to start and see what happens, see how it all unfolds.
Well, knowing the way in which you enthusiastically speak about your ministry at St. Peter's Madoc, and the ability to integrate your psychotherapy training in that, and hearing the way in which you speak about the Jays, you had mentioned at some point that you want to maybe try your own podcast. Maybe you should do a kind of, I don't know, a blend of the whole thing. Like, you do a little Jays talk, and then you move into some ministry stuff, or how baseball is some kind of, I don't know, some kind of parallel to Jesus' work. I don't know. You got some stuff going on there, Rebekah. Some things to ponder, some ideas.
That's exciting, because the thing that I feel like the thing that makes a good podcast is when people talk about the things they're passionate about and that they love to talk about. So I was joking with a couple of friends about this possibility of a podcast, and we were joking how I could be like a modern day church lady, but then mix that with mental health. And I hadn't thought of baseball being part of that, but hey, maybe I need to find a way to just bring that in as well.
Well, and if you're looking for some other advice, Matthew Bruff, one of our ministers in the PCC out in Winnipeg, he's dabbled in a variety of different podcasts, but I also know he has one specifically, I think it's with his sister, that's all about the Winnipeg Jets hockey team. Oh, yeah. So there you go. You could just have 2 or 3, get all your energy out on the Jays talk, and then you do another one about
I'll just have
ministry
10 different podcasts.
Mental health. Yeah, just dabble. Sara, do you want to wrap us up and
sure,
and bring us home, as it were?
Yes. Just to close, is there anything you were hoping that we would ask but we haven't yet?
Let me think about that. I don't think so. I had a thought earlier of I was going to touch on something, and it's gone out of my brain now. So whatever it was, I guess not this time. I think this has been a great conversation. I just love that I'm going to be leaving this conversation with some extra ideas that I didn't have before. So that's kind of it's that reciprocal thing. When you do good things, when you put good things out into the world, it comes back to you. And so I certainly feel that way about this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And honestly, it's just been so wonderful and inspiring to meet you, Rebekah. And I thank John so much for the introduction, just to see the many possibilities and directions that the MPS grads can take their ministry work out in the world, and finding pathways all over in the church, outside of the church. And thank you very, very much for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thanks for joining us today on the Ministry Forum podcast. We hope today's episode resonated with you and sparked your curiosity. Remember, you're not alone in your ministry journey. We're at the other end of some form of technology, and our team is committed to working hard to support your ministry every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell your friends, your family, and your colleagues. Tell someone. Please don't keep us a secret. And of course, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review in the places you listen to podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more ministry leaders just like you. And honestly, it reminds us that we're not alone either. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Ministry Forum on all of our channels. You can visit our website at ministryforum.ca for more resources, keeping up with upcoming events, and ways to connect with our growing community. Until next time, may God's strength and courage be yours in all that you do. May you be fearless, not reckless, and may you be well in body, mind, and spirit, and may you be at